Hello friends, my name is Emile, and welcome back to Reach the Peak, the show where you guys recommend the cars and then I take them up our twisty, challenging, technical hill climb course to see which car can come out on top. We have 5 vehicles here today, as always, suggested by you folks at home, and we start with the first vehicle now. This is the 2002 Nissan Skyline R34. This thing has 327 horsepower, 293 foot-pound of torque, 3,439 pounds of weight, and is an A-Class car, 786 in PI when equipped with the snow tyres. It is the most powerful vehicle here today. It is tied for the torquiest vehicle here today. It is the heaviest vehicle here today, and it's also the highest PI vehicle here today. So, yeah, on paper this should be the quickest car here today. On paper this car should be pretty darn phenomenal up here, to be honest with you. It has sort of optimum weight, optimum power, decent torque, all-wheel drive, you know, all the recipes of a good car to drive up here. As far as actually driving the R34, what's it like? It's very, very good, as you'd probably expect, really. Yeah, it's pretty quick, finds traction well enough, handles well enough. Does have a bit of an issue with understeer, sort of, especially when you're sort of taking these mid-speed corners. You can feel, you know, low to moderate understeer sort of creep in from time to time. We'd kind of expect that from a car such as, you know, all-wheel drive, decent amount of power and so on. So it didn't really surprise me, and it's definitely an easy vehicle to drive up here. Very well rounded for this sort of course. If I had one complaint about the R34, probably it's a little bit dull to drive up here. It's not a huge amount of fun driving this vehicle up here, you know, because it's a very predictable, very easy car to drive. I mean, I'm not throwing that against it because, you know, ultimately having nice to drive cars up here is, you know, obviously it's a good thing and it's going to help it get a good lap time. But it's just not particularly interesting when it came to the driving front. However, this vehicle should do pretty darn well up here. As I've said before, statistically it's great. The fastest non-purpose built car to go up here thus far, I believe, is the Subaru Impreza 22B, which is sort of currently holding that crown. The Skyline does have a very good chance of breaking it. It does have more power, does have more torque. Weight-wise, I believe they're around the same. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see at the end of the show, how, you know, if this beats 22B, and if it does, by how much it shall beat it. Next up, we have the pretty crazy looking, thanks to some rally modifications, 1989 Mitsubishi Galant VR4, 237 horsepower, 224 foot-pound of torque, 2,981 pounds with an asterisk next to it. This is an A-Class car, 716 in PI when equipped with the snow tyres. This vehicle weighs about 7 pounds more than it should, I believe, because I couldn't pass up on the rally mods on the Galant because they turn a relatively uninteresting looking car into a pretty darn crazy one. You know, it has huge rally lights on it. It has some strange sort of front splitter bumper extension thing going on at the front. And of course it has my favourite feature, which is about 15 mud flaps. Like, you have the mud flaps on the wheels and then there's a load of them underneath the car. Not really sure what their purpose is, but it looks cool. So I couldn't pass up on the opportunity to do it. So interestingly enough, at the time of recording, this is actually the only Mitsubishi that has been requested up this course. We've had no Evos up this course thus far. And as far as sort of finding a place for the Galant to go, this is very similar to that Subaru Legacy that we had go around a couple of episodes ago. You know, they're both 90s saloon WRC vehicles. The Legacy on paper is... Oh, sorry, the Galant on paper is the better of the two. The Legacy is down on power, down on torque. I believe it was even down on PI by a fair bit as well. The Galant should walk this in theory, and it wouldn't surprise me because, well, it's a good car up here. Yeah, I kind of enjoyed driving the Galant. It is a little bit dull, again. I will admit, like, the Legacy, it's not as dull as the Legacy because it's quicker than the Legacy. It's more fun to drive than the Legacy. If you're picking between these two cars, you know, Subaru Legacy, Mitsubishi Galant, which one should I go for? Go for the Galant, because it is a much better vehicle, sort of from stock. If you're building them up, I'd probably go Legacy just because it has a bit of a lower starting PI, which means you can do more to it. But yeah, the Galant is a very solid vehicle to drive up here. Decent enough, to be honest with you. That's just a bit underscript. That's really all I can say about it. You know, it is a little bit there's not really much you can say about the Mitsubishi Galant. Next up, we have something that probably should never ever enter a rally course. We have a 1994 Mazda MX-5. This is an NA model. 128 horsepower, 110 foot-pound of torque, 2,330 pounds of weight. B-class car, 632 MPI. This is the least powerful vehicle here today. It's the least torquey vehicle here today. And it's also the lowest PI vehicle here today. It is, of course, rear-wheel drive. And that puts it in contention to beat the A86. Now, as you may know, the A86, when it first went up here in the second episode, I believe the A86 went up, it set apparently a pretty good time, and every single sort of rear-wheel drive vehicle I've had up here since, I've tried to compare it to the A86, because there's nothing that's really thrown it off yet, you know, in terms of the sort of 90s sports, 80s and 90s sports car category. The NA does stand a relatively decent chance of doing it. The power figures are very similar, you know, between this and the A86. In terms of weight-wise, I believe this does weigh slightly more, but this actually has quite a bit higher PI than that A86 did, and that would probably come down to the grip. It is a very good handling vehicle, this. It is super, super grippy up here, as you'd probably expect from an MX-5. Of course, they're known for their pretty good handling. Unfortunately, it is very slow. This thing is kind of painfully slow. It hasn't got that much power, you know, obviously 128 horsepower really isn't a lot, and with the torque figures being what they are, it does struggle getting up the hills, you know. I did have to make sure I was constantly changing gears and so on. So in that aspect, was a little bit disappointing up here. I was expecting maybe a little bit more from the MX-5. I'm not really sure why, because obviously I kind of knew this vehicle would be slow, but yeah, I was expecting a little bit more from it. You know, it does handle great, but that rear end can still kick out occasionally. It's not phenomenal or anything. It's not faultless, so yeah, the MX-5 was just, it was alright though. I mean, it didn't particularly give me any issues of any sorts. I'm more sort of waiting for the more modern MX-5s to come up here, you know, stuff like the Mazda Speed, which has 180 horsepower. That will probably do very decently indeed, but as far as the standard NA goes, it was alright. Really can't say much hugely good about it, I'm afraid. A car that I can say excellent things about, though, is the next car up. We have the 1980 Renault 5 Turbo. This thing has 157 horsepower, 163 foot-pound of torque, 2,147 pounds of weight. It's a B-class car, 682 MPI when equipped with the snow tyres. This thing is the lightest vehicle here today, even despite, like, it does weigh about 9 pounds more than it should, because I had to put the rally body kit on this. Because the rally kits on the 5 Turbo are pretty darn insane. I mean, look at that wing that I've got in the back. You know, you've got the... you may have seen it at the starting grid. You know, this thing's got massive rally lights on it. You can make this thing look pretty crazy. And the best bit about it is there's actually two ways of running the 5 Turbo. They actually give you sort of two different body kits. You have sort of a more subdued one. I guess that's like a road car or something like that. And then you have this sort of Group B style kit, which makes the car look pretty darn crazy. Anyways, the Renault 5 Turbo, this was a car I was interested on up here. It's mid-engined, it's rear drive, however, you know, that usually sounds like that could be disastrous up here, and the power figures aren't particularly great, but then again, this thing is technically a rally car. Well, it is very much a rally car, in fact, and it does not weigh much, so I was kind of interested. And overall, what was the car like? Pretty darn excellent. This thing drives like a four-wheel drive vehicle. It really does, and that really blew me away with the 5 Turbo, just how alike a four-wheel drive vehicle this drives up here. You know, you wouldn't tell that this is rear-wheel drive, which really is a good thing. And well, the slight advantage of being rear-wheel drive is this is huge amount of fun to just chuck up here. It's a very chuckable car, the 5 Turbo, which is very, very good for this sort of thing. You know, obviously, if it's more fun, then I'm happier. And, you know, it's fun in a sort of, it's still pretty quick way when you chuck it in. It's not fun in the sense that the drifty way that most cars are. So, yeah, 5 Turbo is, it's probably the best car here today. It's probably the one that surprised me the most here today with just sort of how good this vehicle was to drive. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was, but yeah, absolutely phenomenal car to drive up here. If you haven't driven the Renault 5 Turbo already, now's a chance to do so, because yeah, very, very solid car to drive. We round out today with the second front-wheel drive car we've ever had around here. This is a 2012 Vauxhall Astra VXR, 276 horsepower, 293 foot-pound of torque, 3,252 pounds of weight, A-class car, 744 PI when equipped with snow tyres. This is the car that ties for the most torque here today, along with the R34 Skyline. So, the Astra VXR, this was a car which genuinely interested me. You see, we've only ever had one other front-wheel drive car go up this course. That was the EK9 Civic. Now, the EK9 Civic was a very, very good handling car. You know, it's sort of a 90s hot hatch. It doesn't have a particular lot of power, and torque was pretty woeful in that car, but you know, it didn't weigh very much, and it's a good handling car because it's a Civic. The Astra VXR is much of an opposite of that. You know, it does weigh a fair bit, 3,252 pounds, certainly. You know, that isn't lightweight. And this thing also has 276 horsepower, almost 300 foot-pound of torque. This is a modern hot hatch with a bit of a reputation for understeer. What was this vehicle like to drive? It's fairly understeery. You do not feel particularly confident in handling of this vehicle. If you're looking for a handling car, look at that Civic, take that, because don't take this because it's not particularly a handling car. However, what it does lose in its ability to handle, it makes up for on the straights. This thing is very, very quick when it comes to straight lines. You know, honestly, it isn't too far off the R34 that went around as the first car of today. You know, this thing is very, very quick in a straight line, and that doesn't particularly surprise me with, you know, how big the engine in this thing is. Another advantage the Astra VXR does have is tyre whips are actually quite respectable in this car from stock, 245 on the front and rear. You know, they're pretty darn big tyres, especially for a hot hatch, whilst the Civic was running tiny, skinny little tyres. So it will be very interesting to see where the Astra places. The Civic did very well indeed, because, well, it was front-wheel drive, and we didn't really know what the front-wheel drive cars would do, and as it turns out, the front-wheel drive car, the one that's gone up, has been pretty successful. So the question is, where will the VXR place on our leaderboard? And we don't have to wait too long to find out where it did, because as we get onto our leaderboard, the R34 is the fastest car today, going into 6th with a 213.233, beats the 22B Impreza by 3 seconds. That's our new fastest non-rally prepped vehicle to go around here. Very good effort from the R34. However, it is slightly overshadowed today by what came second. The Vauxhall Astra VXR goes into 9th with a 218.705. It beats out a Dodge Viper and a GMC Cyclone. Holy crap, that car was stupid fast. I wasn't expecting that from the Astra. It didn't feel that quick when I was driving it. It's not far off a BAC mono. The Astra VXR was just insanely quick up here. Mitsubishi Galant goes into 13th with a 220.507, which is pretty darn respectable. Beats out the Commodore GTS and the Lotus Carlton. Beats the Legacy by over 7 seconds. So, yeah, that's the one to go for. The Renault 5 Turbo goes into 18th with a 224.913. Very darn impressive time for what that vehicle is. It's about 3 seconds off the Vulcan. 3 seconds in front of the Legacy. It sort of breaks into the weird sort of 6-second paradox we had going on there, so that's good. And finally today, unfortunately, the MX-5 NA was a little bit disappointing when it came to its total time, going into 28th with a 235.622. Goes in between the Ford Crown Victoria and the Jaguar Mark II. Weird place to be. Yeah, it's 4 seconds down on the A86. I wasn't expecting that from the MX-5. I was expecting a little bit more than that, but yeah, you know, we've had 3 major sort of surprises here today, in the R34 being as quick as it was, the 5 Turbo being as good as it was, and the Astra VXR being astronomically good for some reason. So, yeah, I mean, it's only right we sort of end with a little bit of disappointment in the form of the NA MX-5. Anyways, friends, that is it for this episode of Reach the Peak. As always, if you want to recommend cars you'd like to see go around the hill climb course, then recommend them down below in the comment section. But that's it from me, folks. Thank you all very much for watching, friends. My name has been The Real Emile, and until next time, farewell.